How do you see the Bazaar differing in the first 6 months versus Artifact? Well, I think we'll have players. Is there a release date for the Bazaar? Yes. How long do you think each Bazaar match will be? Bazaar doesn't have matches. One fight between players takes 30 seconds. One run could take half an hour or an hour, depends how fast you play. But you play at your own speed, so. How would you describe the format of the Bazaar? That's a good question. I got to get better at describing it. I want to pitch the game in a way that sounds sexy, but it's like a PvEVP drafting RPG game. I mean, you could call it like an asynchronous auto battler, but it's not really accurate because none of the auto battlers have anything other than the drafting itself. Whereas our game put a lot of effort into the world and characters, and it's more like going on an adventure, not just like re-rolling a slot machine over and over. Similar econ and leveling features to what? Oh, like with auto battlers? I don't like comparing it to auto battlers because like in an auto battler, it's like a real-time 40-minute match against 7 other people, and all of you are drafting from the same card set. And in our game, you're not in a lobby with 7 other people. There's like an infinite player lobby. You can take as long or as little as you want on every turn. You never have to wait for the rest of the lobby. You never have to I don't know. You can play at your own speed, and you can walk away anytime and come back and finish your run. In our game, everybody is drafting from a different card set depending on what hero you picked. Like every hero has its own 100 card set that you can draft from. That actually has some exciting features I'm excited to announce in the future too, but it doesn't exactly fall into the auto battler bucket. I'm still not really sure how to describe this game. Would it be like a series of instanced arena games? Yeah, sort of, yeah. It's like you're on this arena run, but it's not just choosing between 3 options over and over. It's like there's more depth than that. It's not just like A, B, or C. There's more depth within the drafting choice. And then the fight itself plays itself, so you don't have to manually pick your cards and everything. Your decks just kind of run into each other, and whoever drafted better wins. How difficult was it to combat feature bloat? I mean, for the first couple years of the project, I would say I wasn't a very good game designer. And not that there was feature bloat, but I think the design of it was inelegant in some ways. After the first couple years, I met some good designers. I paid attention to how they think. I don't know, just had more practice with it. So I think after a while, a lot of those issues kind of went away. And now the design is pretty elegant, I think. I mean, it's still a feature-heavy game. It is trying to do a lot. I mean, it's a cross-platform, live service, multiplayer, live ops game. It's really content-heavy. It's doing a lot. The progression system has a lot of depth, right? It's a collectibles system. It's the Bazaar. You need property rights. It's just on brand. So, hey, bloody. The game is feature-rich, but I wouldn't call it feature bloat, I think. We've been pretty careful not to include anything unnecessary. Is it on blockchain of any kind? Yeah, this conversation kind of, I'll answer your question. This conversation is really a sore spot for me because I'm actually really excited about what blockchain can do for some games. And I talked about this on stream once. I tried broaching the subject, and instead of listening to the words that I was saying, people imagined all sorts of horse shit and then continued parroting it. If you go on the Bazaar subreddit right now, there's a post from however many, there's it's not used that often right now. We haven't been really active on it, but there was some post recently, and everyone in the comments is like, blah, 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 NFT horse shit, blah, blah, blah. I've never fucking said NFT integration, not fucking once. They fucking imagined it, and now it's in the zeitgeist, as if that, they're literally imagining features and then complaining about these non-existent features. You know what I mean? It's fun. And I'm super happy to have a good faith discussion on what I think the merits of that are, because I think it is 100% upside for players. At the same time, I see where they're coming from, because every single example of an existing blockchain game is a piece of shit in many ways. Not just because they're bad games, which they are, but because they're predatory in a lot of cases. But they're conflating fraud with real use cases of the technology, and that's stupid. It's a lot of what made me kind of stop doing update videos and stuff. I thought I wanted to do the open development thing, right? Because I was so used to being a streamer and having this conversation about the development of the game, and especially when we were in the prototype phase, things were changing really quickly every week, so we'd always have cool stuff to show on the video. But then like the longer we did that open development, the more the peanut gallery would push back on objectively correct design decisions. Like they hated the asynchronous thing. And then after another game cloned it, validated that it worked, they claimed we didn't invent it. And it's like, not that I care who invented it or whatever, but it's just like there's so few people, like of the people that are willing to comment on a game in development, like less than 1% of them are having a good faith discussion. You know what I mean? Like 40% of them want to entertain themselves, and maybe like 59% are cunts for the sake of it. So like there's very little like to gain from engaging in open development, and like long term I think Valve has the right strategy. Like the right approach to community development is fuck them. You know, like if the game is good, the community will be there and it'll be huge and they'll do their own thing. But to engage with that, I think, is like a terrifying thing, because it would have steered me wrong so many times in this process. Yeah, the release date's like the one thing I'm not going to talk about. It'll come out when it's ready. And after it's out, nobody will fucking remember how long it took to make. Are there any videos and articles about the game's monetization? Now, we haven't really revealed that stuff yet. Largely sorted, and I'm super excited about it. I think it's one of the coolest parts of the game. But there's nothing to be gained from sharing it, because people aren't going to have a good faith discussion on it. They'll hear what they want to hear and then complain about imaginary things, which has kind of been what's happened every other time we brought up monetization. I tried thinking of a single monetization system on any video game ever made by humanity that people on Twitter haven't bitched about. I couldn't think of a single example. Everything that's not a fucking $40 premium game from PlayStation 2, people will complain about. I do think our game is the most free-to-play friendly card game in the world. And yeah, like we commoditize status instead of content. So you should be able to get the content free-to-play a lot easier than any of the other games. Will there be control combo aggro archetypes? Yes. The hope with the Bazaar is that it maximizes diversity and creativity in builds. It is a deck building game at its core, right? We're trying to maximize the variety of strategies you can have. So like no two runs should ever feel the same. Is working on the Bazaar your full-time job, or are you living off of your previous harsh? I mean, I don't know why. Yeah, the Bazaar is my full-time job. I'm just the CEO of Tempo for 9 years now. But yeah, I wanted to give you guys an update on the Bazaar and kind of how it's going. Rather than just complaining about community feedback being rude. We used to do this like open development thing where we posted update videos like every week, and the reason that stopped wasn't just that we were getting very little out of the feedback. It was that like in a game, there's like stages of development, and one of the early stages is what's called like a prototype phase. And when you're in the prototype phase, you're building things really quick and scrappy so you can change what's on screen really quickly and test a bunch of different stuff. And then after you do that long enough, you've sort of settled the design more or less, and you can go into full production and build things the right scalable way. So when we were posting update videos often, we were in that prototype phase. So everything was being built with duct tape and bubble gum, and we could show visual changes and stuff coming into the build really quickly. And then people, because most people watching haven't like built a game before end to end, right, of that scope or at all, they expect that to be the momentum the whole way through launch. So they're like, oh, it's pretty much done. Surely after a few more months at this rate, it should ship and all. So I don't fault them for the expectations. But when we went into full production, you know, we had to fix a lot of things. Like we had to build the game not with duct tape and bubble gum, but in a way that it actually was performant on every device. And you could like run it like a live service game. And you could have more than 10 people on a server without shit lagging. And like we had to fix the architecture of every part of it end to end. It is a complex game with a lot of moving parts. It's feature rich, so there's a lot to build out. So what we've been doing is paying tech debt, basically. Like we've been, right now we're in the middle of this rebuild where we're rebuilding every pipeline so that it's way more performant. Our file sizes are getting like 100 times smaller. It's just going to be building the game the right way so that like after this is done and these pipelines are rebuilt, we'll actually be able to change and improve it faster than ever, because we'll be able to like put stuff in immediately and see it on screen in minutes instead of having to wait like a week for the build to get put together. So I'm pretty excited about what it's going to do, but like, you know, that means in the short term, there's not a lot of stuff to show unless we want to be going through old builds. But yeah, no, I'm really excited. We've still been doing like a ton of design and development and improvements, and there's features coming in that I think people are going to be so excited about, and the gameplay has had like meaningful improvements as well. So I think I don't know, I can't wait to show it to you guys, but you know, it's going to be a little quiet for a bit. Who are your major investors? Galaxy was our first. I mean, we were like a bootstrap profitable company before we started making this game, and then we needed to raise money to start making the video game. So we took on venture capital for the first time in 2019, and that was Galaxy that led our Series A. So they're the largest shareholder other than me. Reynad, sort of weird question, but as someone who follows League, it seems like esports is kind of collapsing as investors aren't seeing returns and teams are pulling out. Is this affecting other games as well? Have you seen any? So Tempestorm doesn't have teams. We have a couple players. You're preaching to the choir, man. You can Google me talking about the horse shit that is the esports industry. Since 2016, I went to esports conferences and talked about this. It's the whole reason I started making this game 5 years ago, because I knew that the esports business was horse shit 7 years ago. You know what I mean? Like the reason it happened is because interest rates were so low, so the cost of capital was free. So there's just a shitload of money going into venture capital. And these venture capitalists, in order to make more money, they didn't need to make better bets. No. They needed to make more bets. They needed to deploy their capital as quickly as possible so they could raise the next round. What you basically ended up seeing was this pipeline get created. And it wasn't just esports. It happened in VR. It happens in, now it's happening in AI, whatever the fucking hyped thing of the month is. But in the case of esports, right, there are all these bankers that wanted to own a sports team but couldn't afford soccer. And there were a bunch of kids who wanted to pretend to be business owners and had some esports history. So funding flew to these 20-something-year-olds so they could take that money, throw it in a furnace while pretending to be business owners for a few years. And once the interest rates changed, you know, they couldn't keep getting more of other people's money to throw in the furnace. Also, you know, people expect returns after a while. But I mean, this to anybody with any amount of independent thinking, you could see that was horse shit. You know, like even the ones that tried to posture as some sort of other non-esports business, like, oh, we're a clothing company or whatever, the numbers are just fundamentally idiotic. Like a real clothing brand, like Supreme, for example, has a fucking mile-long line of kids outside their store every fucking day in Los Angeles. And that company sold for $500 million to Les Wexner, I think, bought it. These esports teams are raising at like the same valuation, claiming they have like a real merch business when like, dude, you're selling fucking 20 hoodies so you can brag that you sold out in 5 seconds. Like, it's not a business. It was inevitable this happened, and good riddance. It's good for esports in the long run. People, I think, anchor too much to the esports team business model, and they think like, oh, just because that business model doesn't work, that must mean esports is failing. But you have to separate the two. Like, bad businesses are failing because they're bad and they're run by idiots, and they were doomed to fail from the onset. But that's a good thing in the long run, because esports is going to get back to its roots and grow organically. Because before this venture capital money came in 2015, before Immortals, before Energy opened the floodgates to that horse shit, it really was a good business. A lot of profitable grassroots companies, sustainably growing viewership. Like, people are gonna, you know, and this is gonna be a big wake up call for all of America over the next year. People are gonna have to learn how to actually provide value to other human beings with their business, instead of just posturing on Twitter and raising more VC money to throw in a fire. It's a really good change for society. But see, that's the thing. Like, something like Evo is a business. It provides value to people. People are willing to pay money for that value in exchange, right? That's a company. Like, signing an increasingly expensive roster of teenagers that are going to bounce from your brand in 18 months is not a business. It's a fantasy. Anything you want to share with Bazaar? Sorry, anything you want to share with Bazaar that you haven't? So yeah, what did I want to tell you guys about the Bazaar? I wanted to tell you why there haven't been updated videos, but I do want to get in the habit of making them again, because I think there's a lot of like novel problems we had to overcome, and I think they're interesting stories, and we can tell those stories on camera. So I have talked with the team about spinning that up again, and it's a hard thing to delegate, you know what I mean? Because like I think the videos are entertaining because we put a lot of effort into them, and like we need a way to make them where it's not like a bunch of my time every day. I mean, maybe I should just do it though. I don't know. Like our team can make great videos. I just It's kind of about like telling the story in a compelling way. It's like the delivery that maybe I could help with. Will the Bazaar have a business model that works overall? You know, my theory on video game business models is like the game's either fun enough or it isn't. And if it's fun enough, you're going to have a bunch of players. And if you have a bunch of players, it really doesn't matter what the business model is. Any of them will make insane money. It's just the highest margin business in the world. It's like an extra download costs you nothing, right? You're not like, you don't need to manufacture an extra car to have one more Hearthstone download. So really it's just about making it fun enough. And then if you do that, you're going to have a bunch of players, then it kind of doesn't matter how you monetize. What did you do with your surfboard? I think it's in storage. Yeah. I still have my car parked in LA too, so I'll be back there at some point. What's your philosophy on balancing metas? I think you can balance cards. I think metas are an emergent property that stems from cards, so you can't really balance a meta. I think balance is grossly overrated. Balance is like one of these things that people complain about when they're not having enough fun with the game, and they erroneously believe that the reason they're not having enough fun is because of the misbalance of it. Balance is generally really unimportant to me. I think like a well-designed game could self-correct its balance, you know what I mean? Like a game like Magic has a lot of grossly imbalanced shit, arguably, but there's just so many options because of the volume of content in that game that the content self-corrects. Solved metas suck. I completely agree with that. Yeah, like when something feels solved, it gets boring. And a lot of times people describe those solved meta states as imbalanced. Like, oh, this is solved because this thing is too good. And then that's true. Like it comes up from time to time. But yeah, that's a big goal of the Bazaar, is trying to make a card game that cannot be solved. There's just too much content, too much permutations, too much, like there's all this emergent synergy it's more of like trying to preserve that feeling of discovery forever. That feeling of discovery that you get like right after a new Hearthstone expansion drops, and for a couple weeks no one knows what's good yet, and it's fun to explore. Kind of like that, but we never want that period to stop. In the Bazaar, can I play cards during my opponent's turn? Your opponent doesn't have turns, so no. It's not a turn-based game. It's not Reynadstone, but despite 5 years of video content out there, most people still think it is. Baffling to me. I want to say it's more like Battlegrounds, but it's not like Battlegrounds. You know, it's a different game. How are the honeys over there in Hong Kong? I don't know, man. I am voluntarily celibate until I launch this fucking game. You're gonna cut your hair when the game is done? Nah, man. I mean, I did cut it a little bit, like the ends. You got to cut the last bottom inches every once in a while. But I'm gonna leave it long, probably rest of my life. I don't know. I like it long. I've had short hair a lot. I've had long hair a lot. I like long hair more. If I wasn't meant to have it, it wouldn't keep growing. Would you compete yourself with the Bazaar? Yeah, of course I'm gonna compete. I don't know about compete. I don't know if I'll play tournaments or whatever, but I'll definitely play ladder and stream it all the time. Yeah. Which year was the most stressful for you? Definitely like end of 2021, beginning of 2022. We were like running out of the money we raised from a Series A. I needed to raise a Series B, and fundraising is like the most stressful fucking thing for me. I hate sales. I want to make the game, not pitch, you know? I ended up traveling the world for like 6 months, going to these different conferences and pitching everyone, and it was just this exhausting, stressful thing, and it was like, man, I got to do this because if I don't, we run out of cash, and then I'm gonna have to like ship the game in an unfinished state and all that. But we ended up raising like a really good amount of money at really, really good terms at the right time, like really just executed it well. How did you even end up finding these people to invest in your game in the first place? Dude, I had no fucking idea where to start. Like for our Series A, is there a specific reason you went with Series A, B versus crowdfunding? Well, we did both. So before we ever raised venture capital, we did crowdfunding through Indiegogo. We raised like a small amount of money, like 150K or something. And then out of pocket, we were paying for most of the development. That helped us get a prototype together. And then we did a bigger crowdfunding round through Republic, where we raised like 700K, something like that. Those were our two crowdfunding rounds. But we also did like venture rounds alongside that. How'd you start development? Were you more hands-on than versus now? Well, yeah, when I started development on the game, we had an esports team, and then I was the only one working on the game. I bought some blank cards on Amazon and doodled like a little paper prototype of a deck building game. What's your favorite part of deck building, and how did you incorporate that into game design? I like it as like a creative outlet. It's an opportunity to put together different pieces and create this emergent new thing. It's the creative process distilled, right? It's combining different shaped Lego pieces. And I love that. It's like the most fulfilling thing for me. Like, I'm very uncomfortable when I'm not doing creative work. So I always gravitated towards that in card games. And in the Bazaar, we try to maximize opportunity for creativity. Hopefully every run you're creating something novel that somebody hasn't created before in some way. What kind of steps are you and the team taking to try to avoid a certain meta? Like, for example, MTG Arena, the meta's figured out. Yeah, so I think the reason metas get solved in other card games comes from a few things. Part of it is that the amount of content they have is really finite when there's very few combinations. This is like the issue Hearthstone runs into. Like, there's not a lot of room for creative deck building. Or like the way that they design cards is really parasitic. It's like when they design a card, it's like specifically designed to slot into a specific archetype and only that one. And Magic more and more has started designing cards this way as well after 2012. And cards become more of these like self-contained, like they're meant to play out a certain way in a certain strategy. And it used to be different. It used to be Magic card design is more open-ended. The cards were designed in a vacuum, and then you'd get a lot of emergent synergy. So there's a lot of opportunity for creative deck building. And I think that kind of content is harder to solve in a meta. In a perfect world, a meta is like a biological ecosystem. It self-corrects. There's a bunch of predator-prey relationships. So like if one type of strategy starts becoming too dominant, a niche strategy that happens to be good against it starts to become more and more represented until it sort of self-corrects. And it usually, in a perfect meta, you have like this rotational, changing, cyclical thing. But in our game, how we're addressing that, we're trying to have more content than any other card game, first of all. Like, we're launching with just like way more cards than any other card game ever has. Second of all, it's not a constructed game, so it's not like you build your deck before you play. That's the biggest thing. Constructed, like when you build your deck before you play, the meta is always solvable because somebody will figure out the best strategy and they're going to share it online. And then people care about winning more than they care about having fun. So everyone's just going to copy the best strategy. So this is like what happens in Hearthstone, right? After the first 2 weeks of an expansion, people know what the like 3 best strategies are. Everyone copies them. Meta gets homogenized and it feels solved, and then it's less fun. Which is why games like auto chess and battlegrounds were the next step for strategy games. And before they ever came out, we started working on a deck builder because we identified this. Because in a drafting game, you can't like pick your strategy before it starts. Otherwise, people just pick the best one. So those games have more of like emergent deck building. You find your strategy along the way. And so those metas are harder to solve, but they're still solvable. Like in TFT and Battlegrounds, I would say a lot of those metas are relatively solved, or at least in TFT, because the content pool is small enough that like there is a dominant strategy and you can climb pretty reliably by forcing it. So in the Bazaar, it's harder to force a strategy, partly because there's more content, partly because we don't have like an ever-present reroll button. There's like a bunch of small things we did to like make it hard to like even if there was a best strategy, you couldn't guarantee having it. And I think by design, there isn't a best one. Part of it is also just making sure that for everything that's in the game, there's like something that's good against it. You just want like checks and balances. How do you see the future of your company? Are you planning on making any other games? We're entirely focused on the Bazaar right now, and if it's successful, I'd like to move into transmedia and do, movies, theme parks, all that sweet stuff. But yeah, if it's not successful, I'd like to make other games in the future. At the same time, the Bazaar, one of the unique things about it is it's really built to scale. What I mean by that is like Magic, you could add content to it for 30 years, and it doesn't run out of design space, and that content makes the game more fun because we have this like multiplicative effect of emergent synergy that shows up the more game pieces that we add. You know, my hope is that after an amount of time, the Bazaar just has so much stuff in it that like it's more like it's maximally diverse. So every time you jump in a game, you don't know what you're going to find. You're always discovering new stuff. Like I want that feeling of like discovery and exploration rather than just like, okay, I know exactly what the 100 Lego pieces are and this is the best strat this week based on this patch and I'm just going to fucking force it. And I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be more like, you don't need all this fucking external knowledge to be able to play the game. You just jump in and you play, and then you find cool stuff along the way and you build something unique out of that. So it's not going to appeal to every player, but I think there's a lot of room for strategy game players that want a creative outlet. I guess the kind of strategy game player I am, and I haven't had that in other games. So how do you balance infinite unique pathways and barrier to entry? I think it's wrong to assume that players need to know and understand every piece of content in the game for it to be accessible. There's no reason that a player needs to understand all the pieces that exist in a game. I think that's just false. So I don't believe there's any trade-off there. Do you plan on sponsoring any streamers when the game comes out? No, I don't do transactional marketing. How high do you think the skill ceiling can be with so much content, or do you think, again, maximizing gameplay? I think there is a very high skill ceiling. It clearly shows in early testing, like some players are just way better. My hope is that there's a lot of room for creative one-upmanship when it comes to builds. But yeah, I think it's a very high skill ceiling. Like I said, it's the less solvable the game is, the harder it is to hit that ceiling. So our game, I think, is the hardest card game to solve. I hope it is. Once the game is released, do you see the game having major expansions, lots of new cards? Yes, absolutely. Our game is like a hero-based game. So when you unlock a hero, you get like 100 card set of cards for that hero. And when you play a run, you're drafting from that set of cards. So every time we release a new hero, it's like we're releasing a new TFT set, except players are drafting different TFT sets against each other instead of everyone playing from the same pool. So, I think there's more emergent combinations than any other game. Any chances of a hero's card pool being shared for more combinations? Yeah, that's a really interesting design choice, is like how much cross-class drafting do we want to allow? And the answer is definitely some, because you get some really cool stuff that happens when you can get cards from another class. But you don't want it to be like too common, because then everyone's just playing with everyone's cards, and then there's like no hero identity to begin with, effectively. That's kind of what Hearthstone did with like Discover and everything. Like there was no difference between the classes because every class was playing every class's shit. And so this is like a complete absence of a color pie, to put it in like Magic terms. We definitely will embrace hero identity. We want the different heroes to feel different from one another and to have their own identity. Definitely want to sprinkle in cross-class drafting to spice it up. Is it kind of like building an arena deck? Kinda, yeah. But I have played Slay the Spire, yeah. Yeah, Bazaar's kind of like multiplayer Slay the Spire. Instead of fighting a boss at the end of the stage, you fight another player. Are you proud of the game in its current state? Well, right now we're in the middle of a big rebuild. Very proud of the game and what it is and what it will be. I think it'll be the best game in the genre. And even if it isn't, fuck you. I'll like it. Do you still choose an opponent or is it random? You don't choose an opponent anymore. That had some play patterns we didn't like. Do you fight the player in real time, or is it like super autopets where an AI plays your cards? So right now, when the game is in development, there's just not enough people on the server to do real-time matchmaking. So while it's in development, you kind of need to use ghosts, no matter what, just to be able to test the thing. We're interested in the notion of, while you're watching a fight, both of you are there in real time. Like maybe that's better. Will I be able to sell trade cards, or will it be like Hearthstone? Neither. You don't have a collection of cards. Like I said, it's a hero-based game. You own heroes. If you have the hero, you have access to all the cards for that hero. There's nuance there, but it involves some features I'm not ready to talk about yet. But you don't like collect your cards. It's not a CCG. It's not like Hearthstone. It literally never was. It's a drafting game, so it's like the same way you don't own your arena cards, you don't own Bazaar cards. Is the hero level over time? Not anymore. Originally we were going to do some version of that for like out-of-game progression, but we're doing different stuff now. It is a free-to-play game. You can get all the content in the game for free, easier than other card games. So my hope is it's the most free-to-play friendly card game. But yeah, mostly the progression system and the skins and the collectibles and everything. It's just a status game. Like there's no way to buy power in the Bazaar. Is there any customization you can do outside of selecting your hero perks or something? Yes. That's kind of the feature I'm not ready to talk about. I mean, whatever. It's my stream. There's not that many of you guys. Maybe I could float the idea. So you know how I said it's a hero-based game and every hero has like a 100-card pool that you're drafting from? You know, the plan was to release more heroes over time, right? We're thinking about this like a live service game. Like what I really hope, if we can pull it off, is for the Bazaar to be one of these handful of like forever games that people keep playing for years and years and years. Like 99, like whatever, all but like 10 games ever made have like a 1-year life cycle or shorter. And they're dead and then you release the next one. But there's a few games like Counter-Strike, like Magic, like Hearthstone even, that have longer lifespans, and you can keep building content. And so we were thinking, you know, how do we do that over time in the Bazaar? Well, one thing we're going to do is release more heroes, right? More sets of cards. But what if you're like a player that mains one specific hero? And all these new heroes that are coming out aren't that interesting to you because your hero doesn't have anything new. So we were thinking, like, how do we also let us build on existing heroes? Every time I list a feature, some other fucking game copies it, and then everyone's like, you didn't invent asynchronous. You know, I just don't want to have the fucking, yeah, fuck you guys, I'm not going to talk about it. What led to tech debt? Building stuff quick and dirty. We optimized for the right thing, because we had no money, no game studio when this project started. I don't think people realize that. So we needed to build things in a way where we could iterate quickly and do it cheap. And so, you know, it's the triangle of cost, quality, time. A lot of what you guys were seeing on screen in the very early prototype builds, like on YouTube and stuff, were builds that were put together with duct tape and bubble gum so that we could change stuff quickly. Productive when you're in the prototype phase of development, but at some point you got to go into production and like build the game in a way that can actually stand up and handle millions of players and work on every device and perform on every device. And that requires like architecting it the right way end to end. So that's kind of the rebuild that we're in the middle of right now. Did you guys utilize Scrum during development? No, we use Agile, Jira or something. I don't know. I'm not an operator. I just look at stuff in the build and complain about it. Has the game changed a great deal since the gameplay video early last year? It's improved in a lot of ways. There are some big gameplay changes that I think have huge effects, but the core is still the same. It is a drafting game. Our game has its own launcher. Yeah. What qualities do you look for in an employee? Competence and conscientiousness and being emotionally bought into the project for whatever reason. Will the game be light to run on average PC configuration, or will the visual effects require a slightly above average machine? So right now, in that rebuild we're doing, a big part of that is optimization. So, I mean, we're shrinking our file sizes like 100x right now. So until that's done, it's hard to say for sure how performant it'll be, but my hope is it'll run well on every device, because the goal is to have this be a fully cross-platform game on everything. There's also a ton of content though, you know. What's the best way to BM in the Bazaar? You can't. It's the best part. If you were to put the Bazaar in a category, would you say more card game or auto battler? I think those are distinctions without a difference when you really dig into it. If you really look into the philosophical difference between Slay the Spire and Battlegrounds, it's not that big. I'd say it's equally in both categories. Pre-orders will reopen before any other auto battlers you like right now? I haven't played too many. There's a game called Yishan on Steam that's like the closest thing to the Bazaar. Some people in the Bazaar Discord were talking about it, so I tried some of that. It's like a Chinese indie game, but it's a drafting game. It's PvP Slay the Spire. It's really similar to our game in that sense. But I've only played like 1 or 2 games. I don't know much about it yet. How many efforts is the team focusing on animations, graphics? Yeah, a lot of effort. Definitely a lot of effort. It's a very rich, beautiful world. Is there lore behind the game? Yeah, man. That's actually one of the things I'm most proud about. You know, like these other auto battlers are really surface level. They're like half games. There's not world building. There's not like I can play TFT as much as I want, but I don't learn shit about the world of League of Legends, right? And the Bazaar has a lot of world building effort behind it, and I think there's a lot of stuff to explore. And it's like built to scale with content. So the idea is it's like a boggle game. You shake up all these pieces and random shit comes out, and And we put more of those pieces in over time. So my hope is that the world gets richer and more populated, and we put a lot of effort into, character design and voiceover and dialogue and audio design. Like it's a full like exploratory world building experience. It's like, because if the game is successful, we want to do TV shows and shit. You got to set that groundwork. Have you thought about the very far future with a hero-based game, like League having over 100 heroes and having too much to learn for a new player? Well, in League of Legends, I think you have to know what all the heroes do, because you're in a real-time game against other heroes. So like if your opponent's playing the new hero, you need to understand it in order to play against it. But in the Bazaar, you don't really need to pay attention to your opponent's shit, and you don't need to know all of the game elements. Like by design, we're trying to create too much content to like comprehensively understand it all. You know what I mean? As soon as you can do that, you stop discovering new stuff and the game gets more boring and it feels solved. That's what we're trying to avoid. So my hope is it's not any less accessible as a hero-based game, because like you could literally just never unlock new content and just play your first hero and master that, and you're never at a gameplay disadvantage against the #1 ranked player in the world. So all the heroes should be roughly balanced against one another, and like you don't need to understand all of them to. It's not to say you don't gain benefits from like game knowledge the longer you play. I mean, you do. You'll understand, like, I'm sure there will be some meta and there will be stuff that's like better or worse on certain patches, but yeah, you don't need to know every hero, unlike with League, I would say. Pharmacist, I literally never said that. You're lying. You have 10 minutes to link something in chat or I ban you. Link it. People do this shit too much. This is what I hate about open development. I say stuff, but they don't hear what I say. They hear what they want to hear, and then they argue with me about it. How am I supposed to argue against something they've imagined? I am not responsible for your insanity. Are you going to release the game with localization in several languages? Yep. Yeah, it'll probably be a continually growing list over time, assuming we have players and people like the game. But yeah, there's like a priority list of countries based on like how populated they are, and localizing in more languages over time, hopefully, as long as it makes sense. How much content have you scrapped? I mean, a lot. That's the whole game design process. You make content and then you scrap it, and then you make it again a little better and you scrap it. That's the iteration process, the creative destruction. Did you voice any of the cards for the game? Not yet, but I will. Definitely like to. Are you projecting big numbers on release? I mean, look, we're a brand new studio releasing an indie game. I think it'd be pretty arrogant to project big numbers on release. But yeah, it's probably going to be the most popular game in the fucking world. Will there be sexy playable lady heroes in the Bazaar? Of course. Did ChatGPT develop parts of the Bazaar? No, the tech isn't quite there yet, but we are bullish on AI and machine learning being worked into the workflow, like in the future. It can help you do some of the initial passes of content design, and it speeds up some parts of the pipeline. But how many heroes will there be? Right now we have like 6 of them designed, and there's like a 7th one that we have visually designed, but we don't have his cards set designed yet. But none of the card sets are finalized. They're all like in development, and won't necessarily launch with 6 because we need some sort of content buffer. Like Magic, for example, the set that they're working on today, the designers in Magic the Gathering, the set that they're working on today won't come out for like several years. They have like a couple years of buffer, and our buffer is not going to be that big, but if we have like 6 heroes ready to go on launch, maybe we would only like put 4 of them in beta or something, just so we have like a content buffer and we can hit a regular cadence of new heroes coming out forever. Otherwise, if you have one delay, you just like skip a release, and then that's awkward. What programming language and engine was used for the game? A lot of C and Unity. Why does it take so long to develop? Because you've never made a game before and have no frame of reference on how long it should take. Hearthstone, for example, started with a small indie company called Blizzard, which had 3,000 people. And it was one of the most established game studios of all time. It took them 7 years to make Hearthstone. I want to repeat that. It took Blizzard 7 years to make Hearthstone. The fact that we're going to launch this game in 5 while having to build a game studio from the ground up, from nothing, with no funding, no staff, to start a game studio. Like, what I'm trying to say is, fuck you. Yeah, we have a marketing plan. We actually got a ton of the marketing team from Marvel Snap. like the best user acquisition team in the world. I'm really excited. Is there going to be a forcing card? I'm down to make one. He'd have to voice it though. Is that your real hair? Nah, it's a wig.